Hello.
Okay, perfect. I can hear you guys perfectly now. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you all here tonight. My name is Nicole McCowan. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations. So I'll be here helping Maya, holding the camera for her. So just a couple housekeeping tips before we get started. If I could have you all mute for me just for like the first 20 to 30 minutes. I kind of found last time we did this, there was like a lot of background noise as people are kind of getting set up. So that would be great. So it's not quite distracting. And then we'll ask you all to unmute and introduce yourselves later on in the session. Also, I have the picture that we're going to be painting. I emailed it to you guys. If you printed it out, great. If you didn't, don't worry. Maya has it here. And then I also have it on like the screen. You should be able to see it. It's under like Nicole McCowan. And you can look at the picture there as well. I think that's all I got for you as far as housekeeping stuff goes. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Maya. She is a junior, correct?
Yes.
A junior at Hanover here. She is majoring in art and design and is a business minor. So I'm very excited to have her here tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and point the camera towards her now. Oh, and also, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put it in the text box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask it. We'll be more than happy to get your questions answered. All right. Here is the lovely Maya.
Hi, guys. So you all got the picture, but I brought two that I did some practice runs on, and we're going to do Impressionism tonight. If you guys don't know what that is, I'm sure you probably do. It started in the 19th century, but it's just really light brushstrokes that show the shadows, accurate shadows and accurate lighting, so highlights. So this is one that I did with my materials before I got our like cute little package of a canvas and paints. And then this is the one that we're going to be doing tonight. And it's nearly just like blotch work. So when I started this, I first just looked at the horizon, and then I looked how much sky we had. But then to help me, I flip it upside down. And once you have it upside down, since mine's up on an easel, it's a little bit harder, but you'll just go ahead and outline the colors and the shapes that you're seeing until you have about 8-9 sections of just various colors. Because when you're doing realistic things or impressionistic things, it really is just all about the color and then the shadows and highlights that you're seeing. And then while you're doing that, I did bring some, where am I at? There I am, okay. I did bring some printouts of some Impressionist piece that I've even learned about here in one of my art history classes. A lot of them are Monet, but you can just see all the brushstrokes and the gesturals of the images. And of course, Starry Night, the oh so famous Starry Night. Okay, I'm gonna assume that we all have it outlined. And then if it helps you, you can turn it back, right side up. And we will just sketch those shapes that you saw on, that might be really loud. Are we muted?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry if my pencils are really loud. So there's my horizon, easy as that. And then I look where Parker is, and I'd say it's about there. I'll just make like a T. And then this really big tree is the next thing I see. And it's a little bit shorter than Parker, so we'll use our pencil as a director. And sketch a general shape that you saw. And my method may not work for you. If you find something along the way that works for you, I'm happy to hear about it, or I would love if you'd share it with someone else that may help them. This is just what I have learned to do and what helps me. Then we'll go to the next tree. In this image, these sidewalks that you see are actually really helpful because they keep you kind of proportioned. So that front one's real easy, just another horizontal line. And then this diagonal one. And then just ever so slightly a little tiny sidewalk over here. So it almost makes a lopsided Z. All right, now we'll move on to the trees over to the right, and we'll do Parker last. So this one looks a little bit shorter as well. We'll start about here. All right, are all the trees done? Everyone's good on trees? All right. So now with Parker, you will use the trees to your advantage. So you see where this little cluster of trees is? It's a little bit taller than the door frame. I'll just go ahead and add that first step a little bit lower than that little cluster of trees. And if you want to include the door, you can. We'll just give a general little box. And then we'll look at how tall those columns are in comparison to this tree right here, this lighter green tree. And they go to about where the tree starts to expand. So we'll just mark that. And I can see about 3 full columns, and then you just ever so slightly see this one. We can add those little highlights later. If you would like to add 4, you're more than welcome to. I think we're gonna do this. All right, and you can see that I am not aligned with my original line over here, and that's okay. That was more so for me to know where I think I'm going to place things. and it will easily get painted over later. No need to erase. So that looks like a little dumbbell that I just did, and that's just to help me keep my center while we go up to this white area. All right, there is my gestural Parker. And I have mine pretty tall, all the way to the top. So it's kind of like I zoomed in on the picture that you guys were emailed.
How are you guys doing? Do you guys need more time to sketch out your painting, or are you ready to move on? All right, we will move on then.
Cool. Okay, so you should have a little palette, a few brushes, and then your paint set, and an easel, of course. And hopefully you have like a cup of water and a rag with you as well. If not, go ahead and do that, and I will just prep my paints while you do that. So first we're gonna do the sky. And I use a light blue, quite a bit of white, and then just ever so slightly a little bit of dark blue. And then I'm not sure if we all got the same brushes, but I really like the rounded one, or a rounded one. They should look something like this. They are really good for this blotch method that we're gonna do. You can get your brush just a little bit wet, and then have your rag handy. And this is where we'll look at the colors that you're seeing. So why we outlined those shapes at the very beginning is for this. Now the colors in the picture that we have are not exactly going to match the paints that we have, just because it's a limited supply of paints, but the overall look will still be there. And this is a very fast method. I'm sorry if this is loud on your computers or devices. But we're just going to get down a base coat very quickly, very lightly as well.
What color are you using?
This is just my light blue. Yours might be cobalt blue. Yours might be something else.
Okay.
And then I have a tiny bit of the dark blue, and then just a little pile of white. So now I'm going to just add, as we go, a little bit of blue. I think it makes it visually interesting. Now this isn't what you see on your picture, so if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. I think it adds some depth to it since we're doing this impressionist style. And visibly being able to see the brush strokes makes it that much more evident as to what style you're trying to recreate or just imitate. And when you get along the edge, we'll use a little bit more white. So there's kind of a halo behind the trees.
Is it important to go around the edges of the canvas?
You surely do not have to. That is just something that I choose to do. If you'd like to keep them blank or maybe later paint them black, that usually is a pretty professional look. Sorry, I didn't mention that. That is just a habit that I've gotten into over the years, to paint the edges. I think it completes a piece, but some artists think it ruins it. That one's more of a matter of opinion. You'd save paint if you don't. And then if this gesture is just too much, it gets annoying on your arm for sure. It sometimes helps just to add the tiniest bit of water to these paints since they are water soluble. And then you can see that that just made my brush put down a whole lot more paint than it did before, but it doesn't give that textured look of the paintbrush on the canvas as much. So that's the downfall of that. But I'm also trying to make sure we can get this painting done in the time frame that we have, or very close to it. And when I'm doing this, I get right up to my outline, but not quite into the next part. So I covered all the outlines on the trees, and then we'll go back with the green and we'll kind of go over some of the blue to make it look like you can see through those leaves and such. But then with Parker, it's a little bit different. We don't want to be able to see through the brick. So I'm just going right up to the edges. and kind of leaving a pencil mark so that I can see some of the straight lines that I did before. With the trees, it's not nearly as important to do that. And then occasionally you'll also, like I'm experiencing this now, so I figured I'd mention it. You'll get those little bristles that'll come off your brush because usually paint brushes are supposed to be used in a flowing motion, not so much of an aggressive motion. So if that happens, you can leave it, let it be part of your piece, or you can try to take a clean paintbrush, one of the flat ones, and just kind of wipe it off ever so slightly. And then you can just put that in your water and it'll come off. All right. So there's a very generalized base coat for our sky. If you want to get crazy, you can add some of the dark blue up to the top. And that'll just give it a little bit of depth. The cool thing about these paints, although they may not be anyone's favorites or you may not immediately go to these when you're trying to paint, they do mix really well on the canvas. So you don't have to mix them on your palette. Mixing them on the canvas seems to work really well, or I found that out while doing practice runs. Okay, I'm just gonna get a little bit more white so I can add more to that edge of that skyline. And then we'll move on to the trees. See, I have not wiped my brush once. I've just kept all this blue clustered, and it's mixing as I'm tapping my brush on the canvas. All right. So there's my sky. Oops, sorry. Now I am cleaning out this paintbrush because, like I said, this one was my favorite while using it. I will probably use it for the trees at some point. But now I'm going to move over and use the biggest flat brush that you have. Mine is a 12. And we will get out. I have this bright green. Yours may not be the same name, but just your brightest green. We'll get a pretty big portion. We'll probably have to get green a few times because there's just so much of it. And then I'm using the dark green. And I'm going to put that on a little separate square rectangle. And then we have a couple more colors. We'll do the yellow. It's a darker yellow, just a dot. We'll use that in a little bit. A little bit of the bright yellow. Again, just another dot. I have it's a brown, a sienna. Just a dot. And then I'm going to put my dark brown right next to my bright green. Now you don't have to lay yours out like that. That is just, I know what they're going to be used for. In the end, they'll probably all get mixed together just eventually. Okay. So we have our wide brush. We have our bright green. It's almost like a mint. Mine is like a very minty color. So I'm going to mix some of this dark green in with it and then take a little bit of our darker yellow and mix that together. Now that looks more like an appealing green to me, but I want just a little bit more yellow. Okay. So we're going to use this color for the big tree. And again, it's just the same method, same motion. Becomes really repetitive. But using this brush instead of the round one, I don't know if you'll notice it, but I did. It opens more as you blotch. So it's not flat anymore. Mine is not, but I've used mine. It allows you to put more of an open look so you can see through these trees kind of. So when we lightly tap over the blue, you get that tree look where you can see through it, if that makes sense. And if you can see my bristles are starting to fall off a little, I'm probably going to leave a lot of them. If I catch them, I'll grab them. If that bothers you, go ahead and take them off. And this is just our base coat. We will later add some of those dark colors that you're seeing and then some of the lighter yellows in these trees. I'm going to add a little yellow because add a little water because I didn't make enough of my color. And there we go. Oh, a trick I learned earlier too. With those easels that you guys have, I am using one at school in the painting studio in case I, for some reason, made a mess. You can put a really heavy book or something on the back to hold it down with this method. That was helpful earlier because I kept having my easel come back at me. Okay, there's a base coat for the first one, and then we're going to move on to the next one and let it dry a little bit before we add any of those extra highlights and shadows. Okay, so the next one looks like it's a fall tree, or it's becoming fall. It's a lot more yellow. So we are going to use our bright yellow, So I have all my bright yellow, my dot, and I'm just gonna mix it in with that dark green. And then if you have any white left over from blue, from doing the sky, I'm just gonna snag that as well and mix it in. And that also looks like a minty color. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some more yellow. This time I'm gonna add the dark one. And if I'm moving too fast, please just yell out and tell me to slow down. There we go. Okay, so this light green, same method. And I'm going on top of that dark green that we just did, and I still have a pile of it on my palette. So this is the one we used for the big tree, and this is our new one that we're using right now. We'll go back and use some of this and make that tree-like effect on the edges over here. If you have ever painted before, you know it's just layers. For those of you who have not really painted before, welcome to the layers. Okay, I got my base coat for that one. So like I said, I'm going to go back with that green we just had and make a new edge. Or make them blend a little better so that that dark green one looks like it's on top and not so much just cut off. Okay. Now we're gonna hop on over and do the pine tree to the far right. Or I guess just to the right. It's not on the very edge. And this one's really see-through. So we're gonna take, to get these kind of see-through strokes or blotches, I am very, very lightly hitting the canvas. And then when I want the solid base coats, I'm pressing a little bit harder. Okay, there's my pine tree for the most part. Just replenishing some colors. Just getting the same colors back out so I have enough to do this last tree. And then we can do the little tiny ones up front. So for the tree on the edge, I'm mixing our bright green with our dark yellow. And then I'm going to add some white to it to lighten it up a little to differentiate from the first tree we did, because that's basically the same mixture. Right. So for those little tiny trees up front, I'm just going to get out white and I'm going to use my dark yellow again. But then I'm going to take my smallest round brush that I have. Mine is a 4. And just take the slightest bit of yellow, because you'd rather have just not enough than too much, and mix it with that white. To get just a very, very light yellow. And then I'm going to blotch up more white onto the edges as our first highlight. And we'll go back and add more later when it dries a little bit. And all that texture, I really like seeing the texture. If texture isn't your thing, smooth it out. Whatever makes you happy with this canvas, please do. My methods may not be as appealing to you. And then there's some more little trees over here in front of our pine tree to the right. Sorry.
6:41.
All right. So now we are going to go ahead and paint Parker and get pretty much the whole top half done. Then we'll do some of the darker colors behind the trees that you see. And then we'll do the base coats in the bottom and then go back and add those little finishing touches, and that should be all for a pretty quick little painting. So for Parker, I have a crimson. I don't know what you guys have. It's just a bright red. And then earlier I had us get out that burnt sienna. Mine is all the way across my canvas, or on my palette, excuse me. I'm still gonna go ahead and use that, but I'll probably use a little bit more. So I'm just gonna add to that pile because that's a pretty prominent color in Parker. And then we have those teals up at the top. Which I used our bright green for. Some white. And then I already have some dark blue here on my palette, so I'm not going to add any more because I probably won't need more than that, but then just add some of this. And then there is a lot of white. So I'm going to make a whole nother separate pile of white in actually one of the bowls because I want to keep that as a pretty plain white to get those doors, the columns, all of it. Actually, that looks white. All right, so those are all the colors we should need. Brush wise, I'm going to use my smallest flat brush. Mine is a 2. And then I'm just going to take a second and look at the colors that I'm seeing in Parker, since this is the most condensed area of the picture. So I see a little bit of a lighter brown, much darker back behind the columns, and then back to that lighter. So I'm just going to mix accordingly. I'm just going to make 2 different colors. So I just mixed red with a little bit of the sienna and some white to get this pinkish color. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of the dark brown to get our dark one, not black. Okay, so there's a pretty dark pink looking. And to me, that is what I see. What you may see on your printout varies, but I think you'll still see the same image in the end. And we're going to put that down on the bottom. And we're still doing the blotch method, even though we're not doing something that's natural, even though it's a building. You just have to be a little bit more careful so that when you're done, you still see the gestural of Parker and not just blobs of red and green. Okay, I got my bottom light part done. I'm gonna add a little bit more dark brown, a little bit more red. And now it's kind of looking like a plum. It's still a little red, but reminds me of a plum color. And we can take that right along the edge of that light one we just did. And this is our first kind of shadow. Okay, now I just mixed red and dark brown together. And we're going to use that behind the columns. Okay, now for mine, I don't think that's quite dark enough. I'm going to add more brown to it. I'd rather do, again, not enough than too much. And I'm going to mix it on my canvas instead of mixing so much on my palette, and just let the paint do its thing. Now that looks really messy. If you're a perfectionist, impressionism may not be your thing, and that's okay. Okay, then we're going to just go up to this next portion. And I'm going to go ahead, since I didn't sketch ahead of time, I'm going to actually make a brush stroke. You may have sketched it, but I did not. Make a brush stroke where I want white to go later. And then I'll do the blotches again. But that brush stroke is just to remind me that, hey, white goes there, not red. And then when you come to the edges, like where the blue is, you can go ahead and cover that pencil mark now. All right. I am washing out my flat brush, and I'm gonna get back that really little rounded brush, if I can find it. Maybe there it is. So I'm gonna use my 4 again. And now we are just gonna do the white, and we're gonna do the white first so that then we can add that white that we use on our brush to the teal. So first we'll just do a plain white, and then later we'll add a little bit of black to it and make a gray and get some of the shadows you're seeing. So when you look at this, it may look super boring, but we'll liven it up. And if you can see mine, or if you're watching mine, some of my red is mixing with my white because it hasn't dried yet. But we're gonna go with it because this is a time thing and it kind of makes it look cool, honestly. Oops. Okay. So now we're just going to make that teal at the very top by just mixing white and our really light green and then just a tiny, tiny bit of that dark blue. And that is super teal. All right, now I'm just going to add a highlight in our white because it is more of a teal highlight. Or I guess this is a shadow, sorry. Talking and painting are a new thing to me. So I added some teal. Now I'm going to add just the slightest bit of brown to darken it so it does look more like a shadow. And hopefully you guys are starting to differentiate like a real image from just shapes and colors, because that's really what it is when you're trying to paint realism or something with realistic aspects. It's just looking at the shapes and the colors. It's not really like, oh, that is a clock or that is a specific things in a tree. They're just the way you're seeing the colors. Now that is a pretty dark shadow to me, so I'm going to go back with some white. And again, I'm just mixing on the canvas. So if you still have some sky color, go ahead and use that over those top columns, unless you've already painted them white. I have not, but I didn't want to do this with my big brush earlier. I wanted to wait till I had a smaller one in hand. And I just went ahead and covered all those little columns at the top. And we're just going to let that set, and we will let that dry before we add those white columns. So you may have to add them later, depending on when yours is dry. Okay. So now we're going to step away from Parker, let it dry for a little bit, and we're going to do the shadows you see behind the trees, or just that really dark area. It's just really a dark brown and a dark green mixed together. Are we still good on time? And as you're starting to notice, I am a messy painter. Trying not to be. And I just have my big flat brush again. Okay. Okay, so I just filled that space that we had, that gap under just a solid, pretty solid color. If you want and you see things, you can add, I'm just going to add a little bit of my yellow, my really light yellow, just right over here, because I can just see a light area, and that helps take away from so much dark right there. All right, I'm going to switch palettes and try to speed up a little bit. We are going to use, we're going to do the grass now. We're going to use our dark green, some white, the light green, and your yellows. And you'll probably have to make a lot of this color or just make it again. But I'm just going to do a really light green. So I'm going to take my bright yellow and my bright green, a little bit of my dark green, and a little bit of that dark yellow. I know that's a weird combination. Just a tad bit of white. Okay, there's going to be my base color. And then since the grass is mowed so wonderfully here, we are going to go with the direction that you're seeing. So if you want, you can do actual brush strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6. This is the direction that I'm seeing. If you see something else, you can mark it how you want. And then you're just going to blotch in those directions. So before we were just randomly and aimlessly doing it. Now we're going to do it in directions, and hopefully that'll help. When you're looking at this, you know what it is a little bit better. And then when you approach where the sidewalks are, I just leave the pencil line so that I know to later go back with that gray that we'll make and where that general area is. If it's easier just to cover it, we can re-sketch lines, or you can just freehand it. Okay, there's my general grass. And now I see a lot more light colors, so I'm going to add more of the light yellow to it and some white. And then there's just a few dark areas along the sidewalks that we can add. But I'm going to do that with my smaller rounded brush. This one's a 6. You could also use your small flat brush that's a 2. That might be helpful for those dark areas. Just whatever feels comfortable. I'm just adding more yellow to my bright green. So the bright yellow to the bright green, and then just a tiny bit of white to make this really bright color. And then this is where the directional thing is helpful. Okay, I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of my dark brown, and then that should pretty much wrap up your grass. All right, I think our trees are good to add some highlights. So while we have the yellow and the greens and everything out, I'm gonna get some more of mine, but I'm just gonna add the same colors we've been using. Back to my palette. And then this is where the brush is pretty important. I'm going to use my biggest flat brush again because it, like I said earlier, it has that tree effect. Or if you lightly tap on it, you can get a better see-through appeal. Okay, so we'll do this big one first. And we are just going to do a little bit of yellow, the bright and the dark, mix those two together, and then mix in some white. And then just touch the green with your brush. So this is what I'm getting. And I'm gonna blotch it on my palette until it's mixed together and until it's very, very dry. And then where you see light areas in the picture, just go ahead and blotch in a general area. So I see some up along the top. And then right in the middle. And I'm just very, very lightly tapping the canvas to the point where the brush wants to fall out of my hand. And I'm basically covering the whole tree with a really, really light tap. But in some areas, there's more paint on my brush than others. And that's why some just seem to be lighter. That had a lot. And then you'll just do that for each one of the trees. So you'll lighten up the color that you had, and you'll put that lighter color where you're seeing it. And we'll do the same thing for the dark. So if you guys are working faster than I am, go ahead and do that whole tree, or you can come back to it. Again, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I am going to finish this, or attempt to finish this tree by adding some dark areas. And by getting this dark color, I just used the green we already had and mixed some brown. I haven't used black yet, I see some really, really dark areas, but I don't know that they'd be black. And before I'm putting it on my tree, I'm just patting it into my palette to get some of the excess paint off so that it becomes like a really light amount of paint for such a dark color.
All right, guys, it's Nicole here. So while you guys are shading those trees, if you want to go around, you can, and like introduce yourselves if you feel comfortable with that. Feel free to unmute yourselves. I am a shy person sometimes, so if you're just not into that, that is totally fine as well. If you guys want to talk a little bit, by all means.
Hey everyone.
Hey, Cassie, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm lovely. So are you a Hanover alum?
I am.
What class year are you?
11.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Okay, I'm Vivian, and I think I can beat anybody here. I'm an alum, but it was the class of 65. That's 1965.
That's awesome.
Glad you're here, Vivian. I'm Elaine Beadle, class of 74.
Hi, I'm Liz Dixon.
Oh, sorry.
Class of.
Hi, I'm Maribeth Levitt, class of 71.
Why can't we see you, Mary Beth?
I don't know. I'll see if I can work on that. I don't see you either, Elaine. Oh yeah, I do now.
Hi, Maribeth. I'm in the Fox Pledge class. This is
Hi,
Sumeo,
hi Rafe.
class of 71. Hi, Maribeth.
And Mole's here too, isn't she? Where's Mole?
Yes, with Christy.
Oh, it's Christy.
Yes, come on, you guys, chime in.
Can you do it?
Are you
We've
not?
got double computers going here. It's Christy. I'm class of 2001, and I'm with my mom. We've got our masks on. We're socially distant, but we are. She's class of 71. Hi. Hi.
Hi, this is Susan Studs. I'm here with my husband Jeff from the class of 76 and 77.
Mark Dunning, class of 83.
Mark.
Hey, Jeff. How's everything?
Falling apart.
Earthquake.
Doing well.
Great.
Are you keeping Washington safe for democracy?
Oh no, it's currently windy right now. So
Okay, we go to Vivi every once in a while and make sure that that it's ready for you.
well, good. They need to be kept straight.
I'm
Hello?
JC Cassidy, class of 94. It's good to see a Levitt. I had the pleasure of both high school and college with the Levitt once in my day.
What happened?
Hi there.
Hi, I'm Marie Dunning, Mark Dunning's sister. I live here in Hanover. I didn't go to the college, but I work there quite frequently on the ambulance service at the football games and stuff.
You got your wine?
Yeah, I got
I
one.
did. But I'm not drinking much because I'm too busy painting.
Same.
Hi, this is Ann Locke. I was Ann Briscoe at Hanover, and I can top JC's Levitt story. She was my 80 Pi big sister.
Oh. I was an 80 Pi.
I'll go. I'm Anna Brigham. I was Anna Duquesne back at Hanover, and I was the class of 2010. And I like seeing all my FIMU sisters. This is really cool.
Anna! Hey, FIMU.
Hi.
I'd shout out, but I can't talk and paint.
I know I can't talk and paint either.
You guys are better than me.
This is really hard.
This is great.
Just so you guys know, we are adding some of the columns to the top of Parker.
Oh.
Just adding like a little bit of shadow to the top as well. I'll zoom in just a second so you guys can see a little bit better.
Oh boy. Oh, man. Oh.
I just added in the door and Parker. I'm just going back and adding a couple shadows, a couple highlights, just the things that I'm seeing immediately. So if I were to take my glasses off, I could still see them. Nothing too terribly detailed. Again, Impressionism is just about those highlights and colors. As long as they pertain to realism, they don't have to be portrayed in an exact matter, just as long as the colors and the shadows are correct. In reference to that specific light source. I hope that makes sense. I understand it, but I hope that makes sense. Sorry, you guys can keep talking. Didn't mean to interrupt here.
What color did you use for the door again?
For the door, I just made a lighter, so I used my dark brown and my white, and I just mixed them, and I
Okay.
got this base color, and then later I'll just add the dark brown at the top.
Okay.
Just gonna let it dry for a little bit. Okay, we can go ahead and mix the sidewalks if you want, but it is just a gray. There's nothing special about that. So just use a pile of white and then just touch your paintbrush in some black. And I think I'm going to use a flat one for it, but if you find out that you like the round ones, you can use that, of course. I'm also going to clean up some of my mess very quickly. Okay, so I just ever so slightly put the very edge of my flat brush into the black, and I got this pretty decent gray. And so I kind of lost my lines of where my sidewalk is when I was doing my crazy grass. But I kept this one up here. So I'm just going to mark it with an actual brush stroke, and then mark this one with an actual brush stroke, and the last one. And hopefully as you're doing the sidewalk, it kind of starts to make the piece feel a little bit more finished. I'm not sure if I'll completely finish it in this session, and I apologize. And you can see some of my bristles coming off again. Okay, so mine is super lopsided. I love it because you still know what it is. And that's the cool part. I actually just learned about Impressionism and some of the meanings behind it. I am now renting a studio in downtown Madison with a couple of my friends that graduated from Hanover, and then another friend that graduated from an art school.
All right.
But they taught me a little bit about Impressionism, and then my art history classes taught me some about the history. And this is definitely not my style. I like to paint caricatures or weird faces, but I like to do them very smooth, very solid lines. So this is all new to me and something that I am also experimenting with. So if it looks a little weird, that's why.
Doing
And
an
these are also
awesome
new.
job.
Huh?
You're doing an awesome job.
Thank you. These are also new materials to me. I've never worked with this kind of paint. So this has been a cool experience all around.
Mine kind of leans.
Mine too.
Mine too.
Do what?
I said my whole thing kind of leans to one.
Oh.
That's okay.
Oh my gosh.
That's a
Mine has
comment
been
on the
leaning
state
too.
of Parker.
It's all good.
It's the Leaning Tower of Hanover.
Yeah. All right, so there's where a sidewalk would be.
Whoops.
And if I were to spend hours and hours and really make this fantastic, I would later go back with my smaller brushes and take the green back over it, because sidewalk doesn't lay on grass, grass lays on sidewalk. But we're gonna leave it for now. Let's go back. If you haven't already, I'm gonna go ahead and add the highlights and the shadows to the tree on the far right. And then I will go back to Parker and do the doors. And then we will add trunks, and we can call it that if you'd like. Then it's pretty much complete. I am a perfectionist, so I will probably continue this later. So to get the highlights on that far tree, I'm gonna just use the yellow and white and a little bit of green. And then the shadows, the dark green and the dark brown again. Okay. So remember, when you're doing the highlights, it's easier to blotch ahead of time. So I'm just gonna blotch in any spot that I've left on this poor palette until it starts to get see-through. So I started over here and I ended over here, and I'm pretty satisfied with that. It looks like a mint green though. I would like a little bit more yellow in it. And then I'm just gonna, again, blotch where I see some of the lighter colors. Okay. Some of the darker color. And this one has a lot more darker than it does lighter.
I am impressed.
I think it was my freshman or sophomore year, toward the end of the year, there was a big rubber chicken that was hanging from a rope from about where the clock is. Can we put that in?
I mean, I'm okay with putting it in there. Just a rubber chicken?
Just a rubber chicken.
All right.
No chickens were harmed in the making of that prank.
Okay.
And I didn't do it, so.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I know who did, but not me.
From the clock, you said?
I have a better story about inside Parker the day of the tornado, but we'll do that.
Tornado?
Yeah. There was an honors convocation the day of the tornado.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So there's a story behind that, but I'll let that lie for a minute.
Okay.
I'm just going to say, because of the tornado, nobody was kicked out of school for that prank.
All right, let's just go to the doors. I added my little tiny gestural chicken. It's really just a little yellow mark and a red dot, but I know it's a chicken.
Nice.
Oh, I'm mixing for the wrong thing. So for the door behind the columns, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of the dark brown because it's just darker back there. And then I'll just add a tiny bit of that for a window. And that's really all for those.
Primitive effect.
I said it's the alumni view of it. Yours is actually quite good.
Mine looks better than that.
Yours is quite good. So for Christmas, we'll give Susan yours.
And I'm just grabbing a little bit more white so that I can kind of blend that so it's not so harsh. Okay. There's that. I added a tiny, tiny window. And then for your trunks, the best advice is I did like the pencil method earlier where I held it up and I looked at it in comparison to how far the trunk is on my brush to how it is on the canvas. And wherever you see one, go ahead and take your brush and make an actual stroke and then just go back and blotch it. And once that's there, you can take some green again and go over the trunk because the trunk doesn't just sit out front in front of the leaves, it's within the leaves. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna add probably some more grass over top of my sidewalk and then do my trunks. And I will put the brush down or I will just keep working on it all night. And for my trunks, I'm going to use the dark brown and then just a dot of black, just because they're the darkest thing on the page, I think. So I just have some general marks. And if you want to get real fancy, if you look closely, or if you outline them, there are shadows underneath each tree. So when you're done marking your trunks and stuff, you can mix a little bit of dark green and just do a horizontal line right next to the trunk, so kind of where my brush is. Okay, so those are just my brush strokes. And then I'm gonna take, again, just a tiny, tiny dot. Like I just put it on the edge of my brush because black goes a really long way when mixing colors. And then I'm also using my flat, my really small flat brush to do these trunks.
Bye.
There's
All right, guys, I think we're getting close to being done, so I'm going to take it off the camera and go to our computer so we can look at you guys. All right, can I see your guys' finished product? Is that okay?
It's actually a little bit above my skill level, so I didn't. I just watched.
You didn't paint?
No, it was a hectic day today. I'm sorry.
It's really funny. I had us muted and we were oohing and awing over all of your paintings. So.
But you can't see it.
No. But those look amazing.
Oh, so cool.
Nice.
Mark, what do you think of mine?
I've never taught a class. This was also a first for that too.
Hey, it's impressionism. I love it.
You guys did great. I love that. So I really appreciate all of you all coming tonight. I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys did too. I would love if you would send me a picture of your paintings. That would be great. Me and we would love to see that. So, all right. I think we're running out of time, so I'm gonna let you guys go. That's cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night.
Susan,
Have
everybody.
a good Thanksgiving.
Bye,
Coming
everyone.
up soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Susan.
Bye.